Okay. Hello to anybody listening.
Hello.
And as part of my sort of like creative activities, I'm going to be doing a series of podcasts of sorts. And it's more just capturing some conversation with other creative people, business owners, songwriters, artists and singers and things like that. Mainly this is going to be for my Patreon page, which is patreon.com/Shotty4HF, but also YouTube, which is youtube.com/4HF Records. So wherever you are watching or listening to this, check out the description for all the links. And though I'm not recording any video at the moment, I will be putting like a few things on screen as we go through. So, okay, the date is 15th of February 2023, and I'm joined by my very good friend, Findley Webster.
Hello.
Who is a singer-songwriter, and we've been working together for quite a few years.
Yeah.
Haven't we now? Yeah, it's probably scary to think about how many years it is. Yeah. But, so yeah, I mean, a few things to sort of talk about, and obviously you've got a gig coming up.
Yes.
Which is one thing that I wanted to mention while we've got the chance.
Yeah.
And, you know, I will say that these podcasts, I've already done one, which was like a little bit of a tester, when I was just testing the microphone, but I thought I might as well capture it anyway, and that gives a little bit of an introduction as to kind of what I'm doing and why I'm doing this. That will be uploaded to Patreon, but I'm not sure about YouTube. So apart from that, this is kind of like the first official podcast that I'm doing this year, and so it's a bit of a testing ground, and we'll see how it goes. But mainly, the reason I'm doing this is because we have so many conversations about music, about creativity, about songwriting, about whatever's going on, whatever it is we've got planned. And, you know, sometimes you come away from that conversation and you think, that should have been captured. That, you know, we really...
in the moment.
We shared some kind of intricacies that were kind of like, I want to kind of share some of those things with other people. And you know what? Recording audio is a lot easier than doing videos.
Well, you know that.
Yeah.
I like being in a cupboard.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, it's I do like doing videos, but obviously with all the editing and the time that it takes and stuff like that. So this is just something that I can kind of add to all my sort of creative content, and that's pretty much the way forward. There's one thing that I will ask you, which I don't think in all the years that I've kind of known you and we've been working together, whether I've ever discussed it with you, but how did it all start for you with music, playing guitar, songwriting, and the whole gigging thing? What sort of kicked it off?
Well, this is it. How long have you got? No, so I'll try and keep it brief. You know me, I'm not very good at keeping a story short, but I will try. So I moved from a town called Wigston, very towny, into Countersort, which was a little bit more countrified.
Right.
I was a little bit different. I was half Egyptian British, so they hadn't really seen anybody look like me. So a bit of a misfit. And all I know is we had a great piano teacher there, and we had a thing called the Leicestershire Schools Orchestra System.
Right, okay.
And unbeknown to me, every new season that used to go ahead, they would bring out all the cases, all the instruments in the cases, and they put them in the hallway, and it was like a mass exodus. As if you knew what you wanted, you'd run and grab it and get off. Right. So of course most people knew what a violin looked like or knew what they wanted, and I was a new kid on the block, and absolutely I just stood while everybody was like running forward, and I thought, wow, this looks like it might be all right. So I ran forward, and it literally was the last box, and I picked it up, and it was a rectangle box, and I had no idea what was in it. And when I got it home, it was a trumpet.
Oh, right.
And my parents went, God, child, and if you're going to be playing that, it can be X amount of hours. I was banned from making noise, basically. And of course, I'd chosen the noisiest instrument. And as it happened, because I was a bit insular there, I got into playing it, and I did practice, and I did commit to it. And I had a French horn teacher at the time, Mr. Thornton, and he said, well, actually not half bad. So I did my grade 4, and I got put through to the school's orchestra programme.
Right, okay.
So from 8 onwards, and then there used to be a little bus that come through the village on a Saturday morning. It'd pick everybody up at different stops, and we'd be taken into Leicester, and we would work on classical music and whatever. So I was taught classically, and that's where my love for music started.
Right, okay.
But of course, I always wanted to be a rock chick. I discovered later. So
right.
that changed the dynamics.
Sort of moved on to that, and so it was trumpet.
Trumpet, And the thing about the trumpet, obviously it's not the sexiest instrument, but I went all the way with the school's orchestras, and I got into the senior orchestras, and then you have the choice to go to the classical school of music and whatever.
Right.
And I knew then actually I wanted to make records. So I was into, Debbie Harry and all the usual punk. We did the punk thing and everything. And and I was like, well, how do I do this? There was no Brit school then. And also you go to your careers officer and they're kind of like, well, there's not a course for pop stars.
Yeah.
You can go down the classical route. And I said, well, what if I don't want to? Well, believe it or not, the only options available then, because it's how old I am, I could join the army or the Air Force and be in a military band.
Wow.
But the only military band that was the best in the world was the Royal Marines.
Oh, okay.
And they didn't take women.
Oh, wow.
And then strangely, so after I've packed up the orchestra, my dad used to be in a brass band, Wigston Temperance Band.
Right.
And I ended up being soprano cornet player. So I changed from B flat to E flat.
Right, okay.
And became a cornet player for the brass band.
Right. Okay. A bit of an interesting start. I do remember now you said about playing the trumpet, but I wasn't aware of all that.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was kind of like the footing for getting into pop, rock music and aspiring
music
to those
in
other
general
artists. Right, okay. That's an interesting beginning.
But I had quite a unique school. It was Council College. They used to call it the Vandal Factory. Right. It was quite free-spirited. Yeah, I mean, I came from, calling our teachers Mr. and Sir and Miss and all that kind of thing. And there you used to call your teachers by their first name. So it was Polly and whatever, Molly and whatever.
Right, okay.
And so it was, and you actually were able to choose your own curriculum. So not always good for an...
no.
I mean... Great for a creative, not so great for an academic, but there were good teachers there. But we had this incredible music block, which was just open all the time. So I just used to go down there, and that's when I picked up the guitar.
Okay.
And
this was at what age?
I would be probably be 11, 12.
Right. Okay.
Maybe, and then probably about that. And then I was self-taught on the guitar. Yeah. Which is my unique style of playing now.
Right,
most guitar players will gasp at why are you doing that?
I think from my experience, there's more self-taught guitarists out there than there are.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That have either been taught by a teacher and can read all the tab and everything else. I mean, most of the guitarists I know, and I do know quite a few, I think they're all pretty much self-taught, but then maybe had some lessons at some point. Do you know what I mean? Or studied the books at some point.
I think what I remember. Being classically trained and reading the dots, I could read the dots as a trumpet player, and I was spot on for sight reading.
Wow.
If you took the dots away, I was absolutely useless.
Okay.
So being self-taught on the guitar, I had no restraints in the fact that it was in my imagination. So most musicians that I've met throughout my working stuff is that if you're too technically perfect, you're a bit of a machine.
Right.
And then they're not always fluid to work with. If you're kind of self-taught but have a little bit of knowledge, but you don't rely on all of the knowledge and make it take you over, there are no rules, I don't think.
It's too sort of systematic, kind of mechanical, maybe. I think I know what you mean, rather than the...
It's like we're saying about session players. They can come and you can get great players that will read the dots, do the score, it feels right, it does it. But as a creative, when you start writing songs and you want to be with people that... I've always been open to, I'm never, down, this is how I want it. I kind of, in my head, I know how I want it. Strangely, I know what I don't want when I hear it.
Yeah.
Which is annoying for some people. But I love giving the artist the freedom to because they can, I'm not a great guitarist, but you get a great guitarist come in and start noodling a little hook and you go, wow, yeah. It takes it on another journey, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think with music and creating, for me anyway, I sometimes see it as there's either additive music making, which is where you're thinking of things to add to the pile and you're coming up with things in your head that you then go and try to find to add on top of whatever else you've got. But then there's the subtractive side, which is kind of like carving or wood sculpting. Do you know what I mean? Where you start with a massive stuff and pick away the bits that you don't like. Yeah. And it's like a kind of an opposite angle to sort of view things like that. But it's interesting, and I think both are kind of necessary when it comes to making music.
I think they are, and I don't think you ever know with each project that you're doing, there are no set rules for me that like with there should be a verse, a bridge, and a chorus. There is in popular structured music, and it's what the earworm kind of is tend to used to. But if you go back to the days of your Pink Floyds and your Genesis, and these bands were allowed to just go off on one. Who's wrong and who's right? Well, I suppose in today's terms, who's right is who sells. That's the problem we've got. Yeah,
to a point.
To a point,
so I know what you
and
mean.
I do get it.
Yeah.
But then there's artistic freedom as well of not. I think a producer of mine once said, your problem is you're not a one-trick pony, which in a way was a backhanded compliment, because if I'd just chosen a 3-bar chord rock song and did a whole album of it with a certain voice, it would be a lot easier to sell and for people to understand.
Yeah.
But as a creative, you are constantly looking to grow, and your mind changes all the time.
Of course. I think that's when you know that like music is kind of pure from an artist, if I can say it like that, when their style and genre reflects the different moods that they wake up into every single day. But I mean, like you say, from a selling point of view, or from that commercial aspect, to have an album where it doesn't seem consistent with the same style. Like if somebody likes one song, they're going to probably buy the album because they're hoping that the rest of it sounds like that one song,
and then they'll be disappointed.
And, and I've done that before with some of my albums. But at the same time, it's like, you know what, this is what I'm expressing, this is what I'm creating at the moment, and
it's where you are and who you are at the moment.
And that kind of comes through in the music. But that's all very, very interesting. I wasn't aware of some of that, so I'm glad I asked the question. There you go. And it's a starting point. So I mean, how have things been going with music the last sort of couple of years? I know obviously Kiss My Tiara
was re-released
almost 20 years later.
I know, so it was an odd one. You know what it's like, you work, you so I don't know what success is. Success to me is being happy, but we all want to get recognised. But I think 20 years, 2000, Kiss My Tiara, and I was so enthusiastic, and so, but in a way it was ahead of its time for indie rock. And I felt with rock music that from a female point of view, it was still like the leather trousers and the big hair, like the Cher kind of thing. And they couldn't get their head around my look, and also, doing this music. But it was actually the energy that the band created. I'm not a per se rock singer, not like Melissa Etheridge or Beth Hart. Right. But I still felt, the idea of the song could get across. And it was quite out there at the time. It was quite risky, I suppose. I worked with a really great guitarist called Ian Jones, and he was a typical rock star. And he sort of said to me when we were laughing and sort of creating the lyrics and stuff, and he said, I said, we can't do that because we kind of have a lot. And he said, so you can say and do what you want. So, of course, I did. And then I paid the consequences afterwards because people's interpretation of how they saw it. And I think a classic was... I think it was something like Custard, I don't know, some magazine. And this guy described it as, I think she's a nymphomaniac that sits in her bedroom and fantasizes about all of these things. And of course, I think I blushed, but I remember thinking, my God, really? Is that what you thought? Because where I was coming from, it wasn't, it was risque, but it wasn't anything by today's standards. But anyway, long story short, is over COVID, the one good thing with COVID that happened to me was having waited 20 years for a particular conversation with a said record label and publishing company. I got contacted by Spigra.com, which is a publishing company and an Orchard label, a streaming label. And I'd actually met them, I think about 8 years before in London.
Right.
And I remember sitting down, and it was one of those horrible conversations like, well, what do you want to do? Who do you want to be? And I thought, blimey, I thought I'd had the answer to that question. But they're actually big questions to answer when you're faced with the big boys in the scheme of things. And I was totally unprepared. And I came away thinking, well, they weren't impressed at all with any of that because it looks like I don't know what I'm doing.
Right.
But by the by. So anyway, I was contacted by them. I had a fantastic Zoom with the director, and what I liked about them, they are all artist based in the sense of we know you're a good songwriter, right?
Yeah.
You're a good songwriter.
Yeah.
And we would like to hopefully get your stuff published and out there for other artists, which is ultimately what you'd like to do.
Yeah.
Because like I said about diversity, not every song belongs to me. And therefore, who am I to say it belongs to me? I'm not going to give it away, but I really do want a person that cannot write but has a great voice or has a character to maybe hear a song of mine and say, oh, I could do that and I could probably do it better. And I'd go, great, show me.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So they took me on that basis as a songwriter. So I'm now published. And then the streaming label, how that came about is he went, don't worry, we're not worried about your age. Now I sound like I'm 105, but I might as well be. And I'm not worried about my age, actually. It's everybody else that seems to worry about it. But the thing with that was he said, I think we should start from the beginning because we don't know who Findley Webster is. Your profile's crap, really. And I said, well, there's only one of me. And there's only so many hours in the day that I can click and buzz and do and go, look at me, look at me. And really statistically find out nobody cares that much when they do, you know.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, it feels like that. It feels
a lot to keep on top of.
It can be lonely sometimes. Yeah. And so we started from the beginning, which is Kiss My Tiara. And I'm fortunate that, yes, after 20 years, I've got quite a few albums to release yet.
Right, yeah,
before
of course,
in answer to your question, before I get to the point of what am I doing now, which is I've no idea until I can buckle down and whatever. But I think through all that growing process and something else, there will be something. And it's probably like your creative spirit is that there'll be a day, there'll be a time, and you go, yes, that's going to kick me off again. Yeah, I don't know when that'll be, but it's always there. I
mean, sometimes with some of the ideas I get for like singles, EPs, that kind of thing. When I get the idea, I really want to do it overnight, but it's just not possible. And I think it's difficult sometimes when you have that idea and you think, yeah, that's the one. It's a great idea. I really want to get that out there, to hold on to that. And also sustain that kind of excitement and passion for the project and not let that simmer away until it becomes an old idea or, something you want to move on from. And it is very difficult, especially, with daily life and the other things that kind of become obstacles, don't they? I guess, in a way, slow you down. Yeah,
there are two things with songwriting. I think sometimes it can flow so quickly and you go, it can't be that easy, surely. And you start trying to complicate things. Yeah. And it's actually just a good song. Yeah. Leave it as it is. Then there's just the one that niggles away. But what I loved about having the band, when you work with people for 2 or 3 years and they're familiar with your taste and the groove and whatever, and you've got a set of musicians that lock in. The early days for me were a lot easier because it wasn't a one-trick pony, but it was a specific sound. Yeah. And because I had the same group of musicians, so that made it easier. But I used to go in with a new idea, and instantly the drummer would know, the bass player would know. And I'd got this at my fingertips thing that took what you were talking about, having to find the sound, having to find the groove, having to do this. Yeah. It made that kind part of it so much easier. Yeah. So I kind of got sport in a way, because then when I went acoustically and you started from the bass, and then as you know, I say I'm not a producer. I'm a person that had to learn how to use a system called Logic. Yeah. I work on Logic. It baffles me. It's technology. It overwhelms me. But the only way I was going to get my ideas out was to, find the drum loop, do the bass part, of which I'll admittedly say I'm not any good at any of them. I've got an idea of it. I don't like to simulate too much because having come from a live band feel, unlike the grooves and stuff that yourself uses and whatever, it's different. But you don't always get it right. So that thing in your head that you're talking about, you can get frustrated because you go, I was so close, but I'm going to have to spend 1,000 hours going through all these simulated sounds to find the little that's in my head that gets near to the thing of it. So
rather than the energy kind of like being fed off each other. Yeah. And sort of sometimes you give an idea to somebody else and they can kind of catapult it forwards in their own way. kind of thing. And yeah, no, I do totally understand that. But yeah, I mean, I came from a band as well. You know, I started in a band. It was that teenage thing of aspiring to like Oasis and stuff like that, and just believing it was possible to go from nothing to being a massive band like that. And we all had that kind of like hope and desire to sort of turn it into something bigger.
You got to think like that.
Yeah, you have to.
You have to. You're invincible at that age as well.
Yeah,
you know? Yeah.
That was the thing. And then, you know, obviously because I always liked electronic music. When it came to producing music, it was like, oh, it's almost like I've heard this before. You know, you learn to play by ear.
Yeah.
You can listen to a song and then pick it up. I know I'll have to sort that microphone cable out on the next time. It just
got long arms.
It's all right. The microphone cable kind of loops underneath the other microphone, and it's very easy.
And
to
I could be a bit animated.
Yeah, I'll do something about that next time. Yeah, but yeah, I think for me, like listening to a lot of electronic music, which was all sort of samples and synthesizers. It was almost like learning to play by ear, listening to the songs and breaking it down in my head, where the samples were, where the drum beats were, how did they get that bass sound in there, and the tiny little bits that you hear. So yeah, for me, I mean, I went from being in a band to just producing, not really songwriting, just mashing all this stuff together.
Learning the sounds. I mean, I'd say you have this incredible skill at frequency and knowing where to place things. So all that, whatever that is where you are now. I have to say your work's great. What I was going to say is the difference between a band. What made that groove, whether it was hip hop or the whatever you call drum and bass. Sorry, yeah. What was it about those sounds and frequencies? Because we're always going about. Everybody's got a note, or there's a certain vibe on something that makes us feel something. So what was it about that music that you went, oh man, I can't walk away from this, I'm going to have to get involved?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess, I mean, like when I first heard drum and bass, or this kind of version of drum and bass, which was what you call kind of intelligent drum and bass, liquid drum and bass, back in sort of like 1994, I guess. I've got this CD, 100% drum and bass. There was a lot of it on there that I didn't understand. It didn't make sense. It didn't sound like Oasis or whatever. But then there was the odd track that came out of this drum and bass scene. I mean, everybody was listening to drum and bass. It was, you know, Radio 1 had like a drum and bass slot on there with, I think it was like Fabio and Groove Rider. They had a drum and bass show. And then in Birmingham, when I lived in Birmingham for a little while, all the pirate radio stations were all like drum and bass and garage and dance and all this kind of thing. And every now and again, a tune would come out, like by Ronnie Size. I mean, there was one, you know, the Jungle is Massive, which was like by M Beat, and everybody was like knew the words to that. And there was just something about the groove that made you kind of react, I guess. And it was like, yeah, this is really good. It's got a lot of energy and it's not cheesy, and there's a great scene behind it. And with that scene on the radio, it was like all the DJs sort of referenced all the record labels, you know, what record label it was on, what record shop was involved, who produced it, who's the DJ, blah, blah, blah. So there was this real kind of openness and transparency into this kind of thing, rather than it being like a commercial track on the radio and nobody really knowing who wrote it, who produced it, who mixed it.
On the playlist,
yeah, you know, just like general commercial radio stuff. And yeah, I think just for me, there was like a few electronic groups like The Prodigy, Chemical Brothers.
Yeah.
These are like, you know, quite big names, even if you're not into that kind of scene. Everybody's heard of them. And The Prodigy were kind of like their own sound. And the Chemical Brothers were, in a way, this indie cross electronic, and it was like, I like what they're doing. And, you know...
There's a Massive Attack as well.
There's Massive Attack as well, which sort of used to listen to a lot. I can't remember the name of that song now, but there was one with this kind of like deep piano in it. I can't remember. It will come to me. But yeah, a lot of that kind of electronic music. And sitting up late at night, when I was younger, watching MTV... till like 2-3 in the morning, these crazy videos would come on, like Aphex Twin, like I say, The Prodigy, you know, all of those kind of tracks. And it was like, I really like this sound, I like the energy. How the hell are they doing this? And that's when it started, you know. And I went to Far Heath Recording Studios with Angus.
Angus, yeah.
And that's when I tried to record my first solo EP stroke album, if you like, and that's when I saw Angus using Cubase, and it was like, oh, if I could get this software, then I could pretty much do this myself.
Yeah.
And then when I was coming up with like drum beats and stuff, I was like, I want the drum beats that sound like the Prodigy, that sound like the Chemical Brothers. So where are these things? How are they getting them? And yeah, it just went off like that. And I guess, yeah, following that sound and being influenced by indie music and guitar music and playing in a band, I kind of ended up kind of just meandering through and forging my own kind of sound, crossing over with a little bit of like the Prodigy and stuff and a little bit of drum and bass, but I was still singing and playing guitar. So it kind of like fused the two together for a few years. And yeah, I don't know, I just like all kinds of music, but electronic music was definitely more of a passion. So I spent more time trying to figure that out and trying to find those sounds and spending a lot of time just, you know, you might not know, but when you get like an old drum beat, like a hip hop drum beat that's say like 80 beats per minute or something, and you double the speed of that.
Yeah.
Right. So you set it to 160. So instead of this dum dum, you get dum dum like that, and speeding it up, and it's like, there it is. Yeah. There's that sound, you know. And I think, changing the subject a little bit, David Bowie, when he heard drum and bass or something like that, I saw in this interview, he heard it. He was going, what is that sound? What are those drums? He said, listen to this. And he got like totally absorbed by this kind of like drum and bass breakbeat kind of mayhem thing that was going on. He did a whole album, as far as I'm aware, that was all using these kind of loops and drum beats. And he got kind of, you know,
it's great that, you know, I mean, an artist like that has moved through the different periods of music and generations, so it's having an open mind, isn't it?
Yeah.
But like you said, there's no reason why you shouldn't mix that with a great melody or whatever. I mean, you and I worked on a track. I got a reference to do something similar to the Glass Animals.
Right. I'd never heard of them.
Do you remember? And it was like, they got a track called Toe. And then even in that, because that was like what we call the sync music of a particular groove, and it's quite laid back, and it's not a typical song.
Yeah, it was a good production in that when I listened.
But, and like you and I, because we were trying to pick it, the hardest thing about that was I think it was a real bass player. Along with the groove or whatever. So there were some things in the way of a feel that you couldn't simulate to get anywhere near what those guys are doing.
No.
And like you were saying about discovering sounds, it's like you as a producer, by experimenting with those things and like these plugins that you do and mixing it up, you know, the only way you're going to discover and find these things is to play around, and it can take a long time, or it has. I know. And that's the thing, it kind of seems quite simple when people are listening to it, but the stuff that goes behind it to make it feel right.
No, nobody really sees those hours that you put in.
I don't think they want to, do they?
Well, possibly not. You know, it's you get rewarded in public for what you do in private, I think.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
It's that good
kind
phrase.
of thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was kind of like that. You spend hours sitting up all night, sometimes pulling your hair out, sometimes when a project crashes and you lose it all and that kind of thing. And it's like those things that you go through, that kind of learning curve and the dedication and the time that goes into it. Ultimately, after however many years, that starts to come through, obviously, you know, and then more people start taking notice, you end up getting on the radio, and you get that encouragement that actually your songs, at least the ideas, are good enough and the production's almost there. But I think with music, like you say, you're always trying to grow. You're always trying to get better. There's always something to learn around the corner, even if it's with guitar or singing or songwriting. There's always something that somebody else is doing, and you want to know how they're doing it, or you discover something and go, I need to use that in the next song, kind of thing. So it's a big creative journey, I think, for all of us, isn't it, really?
Well, yeah, and it is like with live work. I mean, when you do showcases, you never know who you're going to come up against.
Yeah.
And you can get somebody who's so phenomenal, and they'll go, "Oh, you're on next," and you go, "Great," and it's amazing how you're going to got to raise your game. So if you're never inspired and you shut off listening, I think the thing is, you're right. If you get complacent, it's not even complacency. If you don't have that drive, which comes from passion, and we know, you know, if we're lucky, we might make a living from it. then why would you get up? But it's this. I don't always call it a bit of an insanity gene, but it is something within the individual, because that's what we are. We're all individuals, and we all get inspired and drawn towards something. And I think it's always it should always be exciting if you come across somebody who blows your mind. That's come from wherever, and you go, wow, didn't see that one coming, or what made them think to do that?
No, I know what you mean. And speaking of the live thing, I think we'll touch on this gig. How long have we been going? About 30 minutes so far. So the other thing I wanted to say though is like when you go on stage and somebody before you has been on and they're maybe phenomenal. I mean, I've done it with like DJing before, somebody's been on before me. It's like, how am I going to compete with that? But I have heard somebody called Tony Robbins say on one of these videos, he said, if you want to be better, you need to get around people that are better than you.
Otherwise, how do you learn?
Yeah, because that's what makes you better.
No, the intimidation part is always the most natural thing. I remember I played one of my first showcases in London. It was at the Borderline. And I'd hassled this guy for 12 months to give me a gig there, and eventually I got it, but it was just me and the guitar acoustic, and it was to support an American girl that had been on tour for a year. Now, if we look at the facts, I'm still part-timing, trying to make a living. I practice like most people. I think I'm of a certain standard. I'm prepared for the night, but I'm following a girl that's been on tour for a year that does it 24/7. And a standard of musicians I'd never heard before. So that was all great ignorance at the time. And when I went in and I got my little sticker, and I met her, she's a very nice girl, and she played electric guitar, and she got this massive footboard in front of her, and she got some London session guys to come in that afternoon just to go through this stuff for the night's performance. And so I sat there in an empty audience, watching this, waiting for the sound check. And she came on, and the first thing she did was stomp this switch, and she started playing guitar, and I go, oh my God, she's phenomenal. And I could feel myself slipping down the chair, and I thought, oh my God, I've got to go on before this girl. And then I went to the ladies' loo, and I remember shutting the cubicle door and thinking, if she sings as well as she plays, I'm really stuffed. And I don't know why I thought that. And she started singing, and for some reason I kind of went, oh no, I've got a chance, because she wasn't awful, but it wasn't in my head. It was the only thing that kept my sanity, because I was on my own completely. I got to London on my own. I'd got to this place, and there was only me sitting there going, what do you think? What do you think? And I'm going, I'm intimidated. I don't know what to do. But I knew. I went through my performance, but when I was driving home, I remember thinking, you have got to work a little bit harder. But she inspired me. That is what I'm saying.
Exactly, and that's what I mean. Sometimes if you want to get better and you want to improve on things, you need to get around where it is better. Do you know what I mean? Because otherwise,
accept
it's like,
it as well.
Once you kind of get a bit too kind of overconfident, you feel like you don't need to try anymore. That's when people generally start to go downhill. I mean, in any kind of business or industry, if somebody gets too confident with investments or running a business, and it's like things start to slip away and they don't notice it, because like when they're at the bottom, you have to keep in that gear way. You know what I mean, and keep things progressing. But that's all interesting. Nice one for that. And I think the one thing we will touch on, and I will put some pictures on the screen around now, is this gig that you've got coming up. The Texas
Ultimate
thing,
Texas.
Ultimate Texas.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So here we are in the land of originality, and it's. I figured I could showcase every night of my life, and it doesn't always make a difference, but that shouldn't deter you. You can still do it, and people go, "Oh, do it because you love it," and I'm going, "Yes, I could, but it's exhausting."
Right.
And in between time, I've done pubs, clubs, bars, and I've done covers.
Yeah.
In fact, I think I did the Ukrainian fundraiser in Harbour. I did a couple there.
Right,
that got me back out doing covers, because people want to hear something familiar. It wasn't about me. It was about raising awareness. And I really, really enjoyed it. And anyway, over the years, because I'm a girl guitarist, I've covered Sheryl Crow, Texas, Alanis Morissette, you know, all those sort of women and what have you, and definitely Texas. And when a lot of people say, who do you sound like or what's your music like, I find that quite hard to do it, because you just, I've got a set list of answers going, oh, I'm like such and such. Yeah. And that makes people feel better, because really you want to say, well, I'm me. Yeah. But I do understand. I realise now, when I've done my own stuff and then I've thrown a cover in, for some reason it gives a reference to the audience, because I can pull a Texas number off or an Annie Lennox number, that I might be quite decent. Right. And I kind of find that interesting, because it's like, wow, you can't hear that on my own stuff. But that it's the familiarity of a known thing. So my old bass player from Kiss My Tiara days had said to me 2 or 3 years ago, he started getting into the tribute thing, and I was like, oh no, that's not me at all. I'm not going to be doing that. And of course, I realised a lot of my friends that are pro musicians, it's one way to make a good living, and there's nothing wrong in it.
No, not at all.
And he said about Texas, and I went, why'd you come up with her? And he said, well, you look like her and you sound like her. And I went, wow, really? I said, well, I have done this stuff before. And then, you know, I came into this year and I thought, well, let's try something new. I did Harbour Theatre with the band and did all my own stuff, and I love doing that. And people say, when you're going to do it again? And I say, well, maybe when I've got a team of about 100 people, because it took me a year to sort out, and it was hard work, but I was very pleased it sold out, and I was really thrilled it came off. And so I've always set myself little things, I think mainly to terrify myself. I don't know,
testing yourself.
It's a lot of work. Ultimate Texas is playing at the Musician on March the 3rd, live bands, and it's the greatest hits.
Right.
Then I found out that there's only one other Texas tribute act in the country, which is in Glasgow, and it's called the South Side. And then I thought to myself, there's probably a reason for that, but I'm probably yet to find out, because I saw Texas at De Montfort Hall last year.
Last year?
Last year, 2022, at De Mont. It was a great performance. It was a great gig. They came out as their own support band, which was quite cool. So they were dressed down, doing the, you know, I'm in a studio kind of thing, doing the acoustic thing. Changed it all over to the electrics and a little bit glamour in the second half. And you forget how many great songs they've got. Yeah. And I will say, as I've been going through them, she's got a range as well. She's got a really big range. Yeah. So I've not been complacent at all. I've listened to it and I'm going, man, I've got a big boots to fill here. Yeah. So tickets are on sale, and I've no idea. I think I've sold a few tickets, and then it's just the online presence, and I've never done that before. That's the thing that makes me a little bit twitchy, because I've no idea who's clicking the button and actually buying a ticket.
Right, so you don't know anything that's going on.
I could have one man on his dog.
Right, okay.
And the bar staff, or it could do quite well.
More than that. Well, I'll obviously put some links on the screen now and include some links in the description wherever I upload this, so that people can go and check that out. But yeah, I mean, it sounds good. I mean, Texas definitely has. You can tell it's Texas when it comes on the radio. Yeah. With most of their songs, anyway, most of the ones that I've heard. I've never really listened to any of their kind of album stuff. I've never really listened to any of their stuff away from the commercial.
Yeah, me neither. Stuff. I have to say, okay. But you start to, and again, like they've had phases when there were, you know, drums, guitar, and a bass. And it was a band, and obviously, I Don't Want to Love Her was the first hit with the. And what I didn't realise about her, I think she's a huge Elvis fan. Right. So there's a little bit of Elvis influence, strangely. Okay. And there's some soul, Motown, bit of blues. Right. So although you've got a stamp on the sound itself, the actual grooves and the lyrical content and stuff, it's a little bit more complex than I thought, but quite exciting. Yeah. To sort of find out. I mean, she does a couple of Elvis covers, and strangely, I was an Elvis freak as a kid. I loved Elvis as a kid, so that was a no-brainer to go. Well, I'm not going to do the covers that she does, but I got a Elvis cover that I've done, in my own way. And I thought, so in some ways, it's very odd how similar we are.
Yeah.
apart from, what one calls success. But it is what it is.
Of course, yeah. No, I think that'd be interesting. And like you say, there's nothing wrong, I don't think, with any artist doing covers.
But it's a learning curve, isn't it?
I mean, I'm trying to think, like, a lot of these artists, like even, I don't know where this has come from, but like Bryan Adams and like some of these other artists, they usually do a song which is like a rendition of another song.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, even in their own kind of unique way. But yeah, taking somebody else's song and performing that is...
They're also people that listen to the radio and fall in love with a song. I saw Fleetwood Mac probably 2 years ago, and Neil Finn was filling in for Lindsey Buckingham.
Right.
And she came on and did the classic, I'm going to lose it now, what is it called? It's not...
I know, I've been the same today. I can't...
the Landslide.
Names.
It's called Landslide, okay. Yeah. And it's classic Stevie Nicks. And then she said she wrote it at 27, and then she went, but had I wanted to write another song in my life, it would have been this one. And Neil Finn walked on stage and did Hey Now.
Oh, right, okay.
And it was just a whole music of just brilliant songs, brilliant people, admiration, I think. So I think it's a compliment when an artist takes another person's song, is because they like it so much. Yeah. And it's like you did with my stuff, right? So I bring my songs, I brought my songs when we did X over to you as songs in a certain formula.
Yeah.
And I wanted you to turn them on its head, because I would never in the life of me have thought to do it that way. So just even as a writer, you don't know.
Yeah.
And like just recently, Bacharach has passed away.
Right.
But you've got, Raindrops Keep Falling, whatever.
Yeah.
All generations of people know his stuff, even though they don't know it's Bacharach. But the amount of times those songs have been covered and sang
by somebody else
in a different way.
Yeah.
And that just goes to show, for me as a writer, it's the biggest compliment. I want to see what people can do with my stuff, because it's like with a younger person singing it. I think there's quite a different dynamics in the way people phrase things now and do it. So you go back to your days of wanting your Oasis band. Yeah. And everybody wanted to sound like Noel Gallagher because it was a style and it was cool.
Yeah.
So a lot of young boys that want to play guitar and stuff will just what I call emulate.
Yeah.
So there's a difference between emulating and copying, and then there's taking the song and doing your own thing with it. You as the individual taking the song and just singing it. Yeah. So the great thing that I learned about pubs, clubs and bars was, when I first started, it was Whitney Houston, Mariah Carey, Gloria Estefan.
Yeah.
And you'd be singing all these different women's songs. If you did them badly, they'd let you know.
Right. Okay.
If you pulled them off, you're a good artist and they liked you and they had a good night. But and when I think about the genre of music and the types of vocals, but I never took a Whitney Houston song and went, I'm going to be Whitney Houston tonight.
No.
Because I'm not. I've got a voice. And there's a certain way to hit the notes. But as long as I'm convincing enough and I do it well enough and I give the song credit, that's what the audience got, I think. I did, I could. How could I possibly change so many hats? I couldn't be Gloria Estefan. I couldn't be Whitney Houston. I couldn't be Madonna.
No,
I could be Findley Webster doing those songs, doing them to the best of my ability.
Yeah.
With all those different ranges and hopefully getting away with it.
Yeah, that's the way to do it, I think. I guess there's always some people in the audience that have listened to the CD. They're like an avid fan of whoever. They've listened to the CD so many times that it should be this way and it should sound this way. And a lot of the times there's a lot of work gone in the studio behind the track, the actual kind of the touch-ups that you do with studio work, and it's to try and recreate that in a live environment. There are going to be differences, but I guess it depends on the audience and what they're expecting.
I think sometimes and also when a person has heard the record so many times, it's odd, because it's a bit like when you see a person going, a well-known writer or a singer-songwriter going to do an unplugged. I went to see a guy called Jackson Brown, and a friend of ours was an avid fan, and we'd heard his music, American guy. I went to see him at the Royal Albert Hall, and it was just Jackson Brown, no band.
Right.
Now, after 2 or 3 songs, you had the band in your head anyway.
Right.
You know, when you're
'Cause you'd
singing,
heard it, yeah.
because you kind of like, you compensate for it.
Yeah.
And then you just realise not everything can be gotten away with acoustically. It was a bit dull.
Okay.
Dare I say that? And you know, it's a very fine line of getting all those things right. But like you say, well, when we did Enigma that time, when we did the Republica support, we had a great sound system. They brought us a great sound system in.
Yeah.
But your production stands up for volume anyway, of the clarity of the sound and everything else. And then
it sounded good.
It did sound really good, and the confidence then as a singer, you go, wow, yeah, I got a raise to this as well. And it was a really good night, and it ended too soon for me. But those are the experiences of taking it out of the studio and testing it on the live ground. Well, we did that at the Musician as well.
Yeah. And
I always said to you, I saw it as a visual, not me standing there as look at me, the artist. So we did all those great videos. Do you remember? Well, I did put a few things together with the songs, and really I wanted it to be like you being at the cinema with this great music and these wacky videos. And we took the digital screen. Well, we took a projector, didn't we? I took a projector. Yeah, and it didn't work.
Well, I mean, it kind of. I don't think it.
Not the gig worked, but the visual didn't work.
In the Musician, I mean, you could just about see it on the background, but it wasn't
the impact.
It wasn't kind of what I think you sort of had in your head.
It wasn't my vision, no. So that was disappointing.
But it was more at Enigma because they set up that big screen at the end.
Yeah, it was a nightclub to start with, so it had a massive backdrop at the back.
So the lighting was
the whole
right
of the
as well.
wall.
Yeah,
we had the video, so that was the nearest I'd got to the vision in my head as what would go with that music. That night really did rock.
Yeah.
And then the tragedy of it was nobody took any video footage because they were so busy watching the gig. Yeah. And I had my back to the visual all night. Yeah. So I never even got to see it and appreciate it, apart from people were going, that was a great...
Trust that it was there, and it was actually there. I mean, it was a bit cramped on that stage. It was a little bit overcrowded by the time Republica had got all of their stuff on
drum
there,
kits, keyboards,
Tenek and the other groups are there. There was so much on that stage.
I think we had about a metre by metre, didn't we?
Yeah, that was a little bit to sort of like combat, to be honest, on the night. But it went well, it was probably the biggest crowd that we'd done in everything that we'd done. I think.
With Exover, definitely.
Yeah, and it just shows that, like, not to get into a side subject, I'm going to we'll finish here in a minute. But it just shows, and I'm going to save this for another podcast, by the way. But the law of attraction really does work, because the more you were kind of like had that in your head, and the more fixed the vision was, and you could see it, and it pretty much came about. Together. You know what I mean? It did come about.
And I've been manifesting that the whole time. Every song that we did, I went on YouTube and I was looking at visuals and comping stuff together, and hours and hours and days and days. And then you kind of, if I look back now and I go, my God, what did I do with my life? I managed to do the housework. I managed to maybe hold a job down. I don't know. But you do find the time. But you, in a way, with the law of attraction, it is almost obsessive. But it becomes second nature. It's a bit like, I don't know, your favourite food. And if you want it every day, you're just thinking about it all the time. Oh, I've got to have such and such. So it's the same with that. You kind of got to think about what it is you want.
Of course.
You're quite good with I think you can't complicate things. I'm throwing everything in the kitchen sink. But
sometimes, being clear, being 100% clear on the vision, and also resonating with it, having that energy and excitement, that makes it come forward. So... just to recap then, the gig is on the 3rd
of March.
Of March at the Musician.
Doors open at 8 p.m.
Doors open at 8 p.m. Yeah. Okay, perfect. I think we'll smash it. I'm sure it'll be a really good night. I shall be there, certainly.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there's a few people I know that are coming down, and if anybody does like the Texas hits, that's what they're going to get all night. Yeah. And it'll just be a good night out, to be honest. And it's £10. It's £11 on... £10 ticket,
online?
£1 online. It's a £1 fee, isn't it?
Right, okay.
£12 on the night, and then £10 if you manage to get a golden ticket.
Right, okay.
I think I've sold out of my golden tickets, unfortunately, so it might cost you £11 now. But that's not a bad thing.
No, that's good.
Yeah.
Definitely good.
Yeah.
So like I say, I'll post some links to that in the description and whatever else. And then, just to finish off, I think this year, I mean, we will get together again and discuss some of the stuff. But I really want to get X over.
Yeah.
All up to date, all done, and then get that released. You know what I mean? Like this year would be awesome to do that. It
it's
really
definitely
would.
on the list of releases. The streaming label are up for it, but I've kind of held back because we had the 6-track EP, and then we've written about the same again, haven't we? So we've got an X over extended.
It's
enough for that project.
I mean, you could even just do like a part 1 and a part 2 and release them separately as 2 EPs. But there's just because some of the tracks were kind of produced going back maybe 5 years or so. There's a couple of things that personally, from a production standpoint, need to be done to just bring them up to spec with everything else that's coming out at the moment. There are a few things that have changed. And incidentally, I don't know whether it'll be uploaded by the time I put this out, but I did a video for my YouTube channel the other day discussing a few things that I'd learned over the last few years to do with saturation and tape emulation and some of these things that I wasn't doing before, and the difference between what I'm producing now and what I was producing 4 years ago. They do sound great. I mean, if anybody wants to see that video, check it out on my YouTube channel, because I discussed the fact that the mixes were okay. I was getting on Radio 1, and everybody was giving good feedback. But in the last couple of years, there's a couple of things that you should be doing in the mixing stage, and especially before it goes to streaming, right? Because otherwise it can create problems further down the line, and it's just... There's a few things that I need to sit down, and I literally need to sit down and have a mix session on those tracks, and then we can get them released.
Fantastic.
And it's just a case of finding the time, sitting down and getting it done. So that is definitely going to be one of my objectives in the very,
to hearing it, but
very near future.
I thought what you did was fantastic, but a tweak with the knowledge that you've got now. You've taught me a lot as well with my lack of production and plugins and all the stuff, and it does make a big difference. So even to anybody's ear, but the people's ears, it's the difference between it being, And
on
the nose.
There's other things like just really quickly, like Spotify. I don't know if you know, and if anybody listening is into production of any sort, but basically your levels. Spotify request a certain level. Okay, so they talk about it's got to be so many what's called LUFS, and also that it doesn't go above a certain peak value. And if it does, once it gets uploaded to Spotify and Amazon and all of that, it can cause unwanted distortion. If you don't deliver the audio at the right levels, okay, is what it's about. And there's all sorts of varying kind of conversations and arguments about that. Maybe I'll save it for another thing. But it's just doing a few of these little things so that once it's on there, we know it's right, if you know what I mean. Well, I'm going to leave it there for this one. But really hope the gig goes well.
Thank you.
And I'm sure it will. And then after that, you'll have to come back and tell us how it went and tell us about your experiences. Yeah, I'll look forward to that.
There's always an experience.
Of course, definitely. Okay, so that is definitely going to be it for this one. If you've got this far, thanks for listening. And like I say, I will be uploading more of these. So whether you're on patreon.com or YouTube, be sure to sort of like and subscribe and do all of that good stuff, because it does help. And we'll be back with another one very soon. So that's it. Big thanks to Findley Webster for joining me today.
It's been fun.
And so anybody listening, take care, stay creative, take it easy, and I'll see you in the next one.
Bye.
All right, that's it. See you later. Done.